Shanks is that character who always gets hyped up, from using his Conqueror's Haki on the Sea King in the first ever One Piece chapter, to his duels with Mihawk back in the day, to clashing with the world's strongest man with only one arm, and splitting the skies, to stopping Akainu who looked unstoppable during Marineford War. It gets even crazier when we found out he stopped Kaido before the war, and Kaido had him as the only living person in his top 5. That included Rocks, Roger, Whitebeard, and Odin. Then we go to after the time skip, where he froze Green Bull with his Wi-Fi Haki that had his connection frozen, and destroyed Eustass Kid and Killer with one move, while also seeing 10 seconds into the future. Talk about a way better version of what Katakuri did during Whole Cake Island, and we were impressed with the Katakuri. Even Dory and Bragi had to compare Shanks' Haki to Joy Boy, the strongest Haki user at the end of the Egghead Island arc. So a character like this coming to Elbaf could only be seen as a positive, especially with a guy who looks just like him in Shamrock ruining his name. That is respected in the land of giants. So today we do a deep dive on Red Hair coming to Elbaf, and maybe even dying in this arc, a brave warrior of the sea, in my Usopp voice. As always, like the video, hit the subscribe button, and of course we're so close to 100k subscribers, so the support now is needed more than ever. Now, ever since the beginning of One Piece, when Shanks gave Luffy that straw hat and Luffy kept telling his crewmates on how much the straw hat meant to him, we always knew that a day would have to come where he would return the straw hat, and Shanks said, return and when you become a great warrior or a great pirate of the seas. And you know what's funny? Luffy is now a part of the Yonko system, comparable to Shanks. Yes, they're both emperors of the new world, so now's the time to return that straw hat. In Marineford, of course, it made sense why Shanks didn't want Luffy to pretty much return the straw hat yet. It was too soon. And then Wano, he was making kind of excuses. If you look at Wano, he's like, I ain't trying to see Luffy just yet because we have to deal with things back home. So Shanks getting his straw hat returned means to me that this could also imply Shanks dying with this straw hat, which is gonna be crazy, because if Luffy doesn't return Shanks the straw hat, then Luffy would have to return that straw hat to Shanks' son that we saw in the cover story with Makino, and that could definitely be a passing of the torch like we've always seen, from Joy Boy to, of course, Goldie Roger to Shanks to Luffy, and now Shanks' son. That's just a theory of mine I had for almost a decade. Another reason why Shanks and Elbaf is such a big deal is Loki. Let's be honest here, Shanks was the only man to stop Loki. Scopper Gaban said this, showing how strong Shanks is and how strong Loki is, and the fact that he had a 2.6 billion berry bounty, the world government want him to be a part of the Holy Knights. That is a crazy big deal. Big Mom thought she would become the pirate queen by having Loki join him and marrying Lola, and Loki telling Shamrock that he still has unfinished business with Shanks, to me means that we're probably going to see Shanks' demise in Elbaf, and Loki's going to be involved, but not in a negative way, maybe a positive way. Maybe Loki starts to see the light in Shanks, and the fact that Shanks came there just recently to see Loki using his Conqueror's Haki. I wonder what was said, because Luffy's intrigued by what Loki knows, and I can't wait to see what Loki says about Shanks. This could be another buggy situation where maybe his anger towards Shanks is unwarranted. Maybe Shanks did have Loki's best interest. Who knows? I also have to mention Shanks' twin brother. Yes, Figarland Shamrock. He comes to Elbaf. He looks exactly like Shanks, looks majestic, looks epic, takes out this sword that has a Cerberus, a mythical Soin Cerberus on his sword, 3 swords spinning, that had Loki almost passing out just recently, and he hasn't even fought yet. And he was so confident. He said, Loki, you survived this, then we can fight. Now, obviously, there's parallels between Shanks and Shamrock, and if Shamrock is anything like Shanks in power, we're about to see some craziness. But why introduce his twin brother, an older twin brother, who mentions that Shanks went back to his home in where the Celestial Dragons lived, and then did not like what he saw and chose to live in, of course, the underground, or what they call the lower level, the lower realm. I believe you have to bring in Shanks into this arc so we can see some sort of dynamic of Shamrock and Shanks, and of course Shamrock insulting Shanks. And I think if Shamrock's power scaling is close to Shanks, this could be a cool moment where we might even see Shanks versus Shamrock. I think that's a fight I wouldn't mind seeing. Of course, we all know we want to see Blackbeard versus Shanks, but I'll tell you guys right now, twin brothers going at it, and them going at it with the 3 swords Cerberus versus Shanks, it would kind of give like a foreshadowing to Zoro's 3-sword style versus Mihawk. I don't know, maybe I'm looking too deep into it, but I would think that's a fun fight for the fans because of so many different dynamics. Then there's Shanks' father, Figarland Garling. Figarland Garling made a name for himself on God Valley. Oda confirmed this. We know that he potentially could have fought Whitebeard. We know he potentially could have fought Roger. He's on the iconic panel during the end of chapter 1121 before he even became a Gorosei. Now that he's a Gorosei, you know he still has his old squad and the Holy Knights respecting him, so he has a lot of power in the Gorosei levels. The fact that he came in there so cocky, honestly, it looks like he has a great connection with Imu. So Figarland Garling definitely is going to be running the shots a little bit in the Gorosei Gorosei, and Venus, Jewel, Mercury, Mars, and Jupiter are not gonna like it, but they have to deal with it because Imu will take them out if they don't like, of course, Figarland Garling's putting down. But also, Figarland Garling is the father of Shanks, so Shanks's New World antics he does not like. So we're gonna see the more anger towards Figarland Garling and Shanks. It's gonna be like a Judge Vince Smoke, Sanji Vince Smoke moment. So guys, expect to see Figarland Garling Shanks have some sort of dialogue that's really gonna shake the Elbaf arc. I think Figarland Garling and Shanks need to both be on Elbaf. Honestly, I think Elbaf Ragnarok event needs to be craziness, and right now it's kind of calm. I think this is the calm before the storm where everything goes crazy because yeah, Loki, Luffy, Scopper, Shanks, it's cool and all, but we need more. We need Marines, we need pirates, we need, of course, Gorosei. Honestly, an Imu showing would be even crazy too as well. That would hype it up too, honestly. And I mentioned Whitebeard. I think Oda, if he does the unthinkable where he foreshadows Figarland Garling through Whitebeard and Shanks' meeting, saying that this old scar aches when I see your face. Knowing that we always thought it was Roger because Shanks was on the Roger Pirate since he was a baby. But now, knowing that Shanks looks pretty much identical to Figarland Garling in the face during God Valley, if Whitebeard got scarred by Figarland Garling, that gives hype to Garling, first of all. Second of all, that gives hype to Oda to foreshadow it that early on in the story, Shanks' father. And honestly, if it shows that the DNA runs strong, because Shanks, how strong he became, and Figarland Garling, how strong he is right now, and then Shamrock, yes, this whole family dynamic, Whitebeard could put a stamp into the greatness of the Figarland family. And then there's Scopper Gaban. People don't understand, Shanks went to Scopper Gaban and hyped up Luffy, and Scopper Gaban said, I'll be the judge of who Luffy is, and that's why he kind of tested Luffy recently until Luffy brought that white form, that Nika form, that Joy Boy form that Scopper Gaban knows about. Scopper Gaban knows about the truth. He knows about the truth, guys. He was waiting for Luffy to come, and honestly, that dynamic between Scopper Gaban and Shanks is a big deal because they're part of that Roger Pirates that's waiting for that next person to, of course, take on what Roger couldn't do because he got sick and he was too early. So expect some cool dynamic moments if Scopper Gaban is there, because Scopper Gaban has death legs just like Shanks has death legs because they're the part of the Roger Pirates. It would be cool to see Roger's dream be achieved by Luffy because how much they love Roger. So they definitely have to live, like Rayleigh, Scopper, and Shanks have to live to see that. But a little bit of me thinks maybe they die in helping Luffy do what Roger wanted to do. And honestly, the fact that they know Luffy is the guy that Roger's waiting for, Whitebeard said to Marshall DT, you're not the guy. Scopper Gaban and Shanks know. So this whole dynamic's gonna be cool. And I think to bring Shanks back to Elbaf, his arc, I think will be fun to see Scopper dynamic there. Then there's Blackbeard, and a lot of people think there's no reason why Blackbeard is going to come to Elbaf. They say, first of all, Blackbeard most likely is going to go to the Holy Land because Lafitte is actually watching what's going on with the revolutionaries in the Holy Land. Second of all, they say Blackbeard has Caribou. Caribou's gonna talk about Shirahoshi, Poseidon, the ancient weapons. So Blackbeard has a big chance of going to Fishman Island. And then, of course, people think Blackbeard going to Fishman Island is going to cause the Madame Shirley prediction of Luffy destroying Fishman Island in that fight with Blackbeard with the Noah involved and everything. There's a big theory like that. Then, of course, there's the whole Wano thing where Black Caribou knows about the Wano Pluton, and Blackbeard could go to Pluton, of course, to Wano and try to get Pluton, and that may be a big deal in the final war. But the reason why I think Blackbeard and Elbaf still has a chance is because Blackbeard wants that fourth world opponent. There's one thing he wants more than these ancient weapons. He wants to, of course, get the One Piece treasure. That's why he told Luffy Sky P was real, right, during Impel Down. Well, One Piece is the same. So we're probably going to see a moment of Blackbeard coming to Elbaf for that man marked by flames, which could be Scopper Gaban. Honestly, he could be the man marked by flames. And I think Shanks chasing Blackbeard could mean that Shanks be right after him coming to Elbaf. And honestly, Blackbeard versus Shanks on Elbaf would make Elbaf, in my opinion, in contention for the greatest arc in One Piece. Yes, that's right. It would be the first time in One Piece history. Well, I don't know if it's first in One Piece history, but I'll say it's first time in an arc that we know that's centered around the Straw Hat Pirates, where the final fight is not going to be Luffy versus the villain, whether that be Garling, Shamrock, Loki. We already know Loki's not the villain, but you guys know what I mean. Regardless who the villain is, it's going to be different. It's going to be Shanks versus Blackbeard. That would be crazy, and I think it's worth it, honestly. The hype of Shanks versus Blackbeard is so much, and it builds into Luffy versus Blackbeard. So I wouldn't mind Shanks versus Blackbeard being the final fight. I know, like, it's like saying Big Mom versus Eustass Kid and Law would be the final fight in Wano. I wouldn't mind that be the final fight, but when you have Luffy and Kaido, you have to give it to them. But Shanks versus Blackbeard actually overtops any fight Luffy has on Elbaf. Honestly, Shamrock, Garling. The only fight that can surpass that is Luffy's fighting Akainu, or Luffy's fighting, whatchamacallit, what's his name? Imu, yeah, the guy known as the king of the world, Nerona Imu. Yeah, so guys, I'm telling you guys right now, Shanks versus Blackbeard could be the final fight in Elbaf. It could possibly be it. Then we have some very interesting moments with Shanks and his character and who he is. When Roger comes back from Laugh Tale, seeing Joy Boy's story, Joy Boy's tale, the Laughing Tale, the Joy Boy's treasure, of course, in this arc. Roger comes back and Shanks is crying after Roger talks to him. I think Roger told him about his Figarland ties, his celestial Celestial Dragon ties and how they were the true enemies during the Void Century against, of course, the Will of D. And Shanks hearing this probably destroyed him. I think this is the reason why he cried. I think that Elbaf diving deep into the Void Century lore with the second world is going to be big for Shanks because he knows some things about the Void Century world. Shanks knows some things about the second world, and Elbaf is exploring the second and first world, the origins of One Piece. Then there's the Nika fruit. I still don't understand why Shanks went to that CP9 ship where Who's Who was on for a little old gum fruit and went crazy and stole it. And of course, that's the reason why Luffy ate that fruit in the first ever chapter. I think Oda was planning this from the start, guys. He knows how the One Piece is gonna end. I think Shanks was knowing that Joy Boy had this rubber-like fruit. I think Roger told him. I think the Roger Pirates told him. And I think that's why he went for that gum fruit, knowing that it could be Joy Boy's Devil fruit. I think this was all planned. I honestly think that Shanks might have wanted to eat in that Devil fruit. That's why he was shocked when Luffy ate it. I think Shanks was waiting 20 years later to eat that Devil fruit and become Joy Boy. And if he became Joy Boy, a Celestial Dragon, that would be crazy. Like, Buggy was even thinking you're gonna be the one to inherit Roger. Why not go for the One Piece right now? And Shanks like, I want to see the world a little bit. I think he knew that he had to wait 20 years, eat that gum fruit, and now that he's seen that Luffy eat the gum fruit and what Luffy has become, he gave him that straw and said, no, you're the guy that Roger's waiting for, not me. He said the exact same thing Roger said, and Shanks cried when he heard that. So I think Shanks had a paradigm shift through Luffy. Just think about Shanks drinking like crazy during hearing Vegapunk's message, the same thing that Rayleigh was doing. These Roger pirates were getting called out by Vegapunk, but Shanks was drinking crazy because he knows the truth. He knows how dark it gets when it comes to the Void Century. He knows how dark it gets when it comes to Joy Boy. People forget that the first world and the second world, those were L's, those weren't W's. The third world in the mirror is going to be the one that wins. That's going to be the W. And Shanks drinking knows that the world is so dark right now, and there's only one person that can save it, and that's Luffy, because of course he's going to bring the sun. So I think this was very cool to see Shanks drinking during Vegapunk's message during Egghead Island. It definitely added a little bit of a different element to this whole Shanks Elbaf arc, because if Shanks crying at Egghead Island, Shanks dominating at the end of Wano, now crying at Egghead Island, Shanks is the final saga figure. We've seen more Shanks than we've ever seen in our life. Elbaf would be a great thing to, because they talk about Shanks so much in Elbaf. Bring him on this arc, guys. Bring him in this island. Just think about this, guys. He did Divine Departure on Eustass Kid during Elbaf, and if he comes back to Elbaf where he's fighting Blackbeard and Eustass Kid comes out of nowhere after surviving that Divine Departure, interfering with the fight so he can get some revenge on Shanks and actually hurting Shanks, giving Blackbeard an edge, that would be crazy. And you can't really get mad at Eustass Kid because he lost an arm to Ben Beckman. He lost his crew to Dorian Broggy, allies of Shanks, and he got destroyed, almost lost his life to Red Haired Shanks. If he interferes that Blackbeard fight, we know he has similar kind of like evil energy like Blackbeard. I think that can be a really good element. I think Oda could be making Kid help out Blackbeard in the Blackbeard Shanks fight, and Law helping out Shanks in the Blackbeard Shanks fight, because Law got defeated by Blackbeard and Kid got defeated by Shanks. And Law and Kid have this rivalry where they're gonna have to go against each other. Yeah, they helped each other against Big Mom, but they're gonna have to go against each other, and it could be during the Blackbeard vs Shanks fight. Blackbeard vs Shanks could be some of the greatest moments in One Piece history, guys. I'm not lying. And then people forget about the whole Yasop Usopp highlight. Like, first of all, Brand New said it best, yo. The Red Hair Pirates are a very balanced crew, especially their top officers. They're really strong, like compared to any of the Yonko crew. Usopp wants to become a Brave Warrior C on Elbaf. Yasop coming there when Usopp becomes a Brave Warrior of the Sea, and seeing his son, how much he's grown since, of course, he left him, would be insane. But also hinting at not just Yasop. If Yasop comes to Elbaf, Shanks has to come to Elbaf as well. And we all know that if Yasop comes to Elbaf, Von Augur has to come to Elbaf, and that means Blackbeard has to come to Elbaf. So Blackbeard fight versus the Red Hair Pirates, Blackbeard Pirates versus Red Hair Pirates is going to be a thing. I promise you guys. Just look at Shanks, yo. There's so many different elements you can go when it comes to Elbaf. First of all, there's the whole family element of Figarland Shamrock and Figarland Garling. Then there's the whole element of Loki, the strongest giant, the ancient giant blood that has this legendary Devil fruit that could be the serpent, who knows. Then of course there's Luffy, who has the Nika fruit that Shanks of course had for so long, but Luffy ate it by accident, which was a crazy moment. I think this will all be overshadowed because there's this dude who has major death flags than Shanks, and there's this character who's a vinyl villain flag, and Blackbeard. It's been foreshadowed since Marineford, and I think it's all going to come to fruition in Elbaf. Shanks versus Blackbeard is going to happen. I think all these ties that Elbaf is doing is leading up to that conclusion of Shanks versus Blackbeard, guys. I don't know what it is, but I'm going towards that as the final fight in Elbaf. And Shanks coming to Elbaf could mean Shanks' death in Elbaf, a legendary pirate dying in a legendary arc. Let's be honest here, Elbaf is made for legends, and Shanks could become a legend through this moment, through Ragnarok.